have a secret. Whenever I touch someone, I can see the face of the person they love most in their heart. Ever since Petter moved next door when I was 7, his heart held only me. At 18, when he first took my hand, it was me. At 22, when he proposed, it was me. On our wedding night, when he kissed me, it was still me. On the morning of our 3rd anniversary, I was adjusting his collar. As my fingers brushed his Adam's apple, I habitually closed my eyes. I saw 2 faces. One was mine. The other belonged to a complete stranger. That night, Petter's phone screen lit up on the nightstand. Thanks for spending the day with me, Petter. 21 years. 100,000 touches. This was the first time my gift had ever shown me another face. For our anniversary, I had booked a table at a quiet restaurant a month in advance. I wore the red dress he had once praised, and the pearl earrings he had given me. At 6 in the evening, just as I was putting on the second earring, my phone rang. Last-minute business trip, Valerie. I won't make it back tonight. His voice was rushed, and he hung up before I could reply. It was the first time in our entire relationship that he had ever hung up on me first. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. One earring was in, the other hung loosely between my fingers. My best friend, Serena, called a few minutes later, offering to keep me company. She drove over, picked me up, and took me to a steakhouse downtown. But as she pulled into the parking lot, my hand froze on the car door handle. Through the large glass window of the restaurant, I saw Petter. He was sitting at a table by the window. Opposite him sat a young woman, perhaps 25, with deep dimples when she laughed. Petter reached across the table, his thumb gently wiping a smudge of cream from the corner of her mouth. It was a gesture he had done for me since we were 18. Serena saw them too, her grip tightening on the steering wheel as she prepared to storm inside. I held her back. Don't, I said softly. Who is she, Valerie? I don't know. At 11 that night, Petter came home. He brought a bouquet of red roses just as he did every year. After his shower, he wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. I'm so sorry about today, Valerie. I promise I'll make it up to you soon. I closed my eyes. 2 faces flickered back and forth in my mind. Mine and that other woman's. 50-50. For the first time in 21 years, I saw someone else in his heart. Once he fell asleep, I picked up his phone. The password was still my birthday. A contact named Sienna was pinned to the top of his chat list. The messages began 6 months ago, slowly shifting from formal work updates to daily banter, from simple acknowledgments to quiet goodnight texts. I'm in a bad mood today. I want something sweet, she had written in one message. I'll bring you a Napoleon pastry from the bakery downstairs, he replied. Another message from her read. The restaurant you recommended wasn't very good when I went alone. Next time, you have to come with me. The latest text was the one from that evening. Thanks for spending the day with me, Petter. I put the phone back and lay down in the dark. Petter rolled over, instinctively pulling me into his chest, murmuring something half asleep. Who did you spend the day with? I whispered into the quiet room. A client, he mumbled, tightening his grip around me. I didn't ask anything else. The next morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I really couldn't get away yesterday, sweetheart. I'll take you to the hot springs this weekend. He smiled, looking exactly like the man I had always known. I watched him for a moment before replying. Okay. After he left, I folded the red dress and placed it at the very bottom of my closet. Serena called me at noon to check on me. The line was quiet for several seconds before she spoke. Valerie, you've only ever looked at him since you were 7. I know. What are you going to do now? I looked out the window. The autumn sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I don't know. Later that afternoon, I went to his office. In the elevator, I ran into Sienna. She recognized me instantly, offering a polite, easy smile as she extended her hand. Hi, Mrs. Petter. I'm Sienna, Mr. Petter's assistant. She was poised and entirely natural. She pressed the button for our floor, stepping back to stand beside me. Her phone rang, and she answered it with a quiet laugh. Petter? Oh, he rarely eats lunch. Just coffee usually. It's a habit of his. After hanging up, she smiled at me. Are you here to have lunch with him? The elevator door slid open, and I didn't answer. In his office, Petter was buried in paperwork, his head bowed. I placed the thermal lunchbox on his desk. Do you really skip lunch? Sometimes when it gets busy, he said, not looking up. Sienna knocked and walked in with a folder. Glancing at the lunchbox, she smiled. You're so thoughtful, Mrs. Petter. He mentioned wanting braised ribs last week and you made them. My hand froze as I was serving him the food. Petter kept eating, his head still down. Once Sienna left, the office fell quiet. She seems to know you very well, I observed. Oh, your assistant. She knows you skip lunch, and she knows you only drink coffee. He set his chopsticks down. Valerie, she's my assistant. Knowing my daily habits is literally her job. Is it? What is going on with you lately? He sighed, looking tired. You're the only one in my heart. He picked up his chopsticks and went back to his meal. That night, he worked late in his study. When I brought him a glass of milk at 10, his phone screen was glowing with a selfie Sienna had just sent him. The moment he noticed me, he flipped the phone face down on the desk. "Just work stuff," he said. "I didn't ask," I replied, setting the glass down and walking out. My hand lingered on the doorknob for a moment, but he didn't call after me. On Sunday, he tried to make up for our missed anniversary. When we arrived at the restaurant, the hostess smiled warmly. "Mr. Petter, your usual table?" It was the second booth by the window, the exact spot I had seen him with Sienna. As we sat down, I stared at the empty chair across from me. "Do you bring other people here?" His hand tensed as he poured my water. "Just clients." "Why do you ask?" "Nothing. It's a nice view." When he returned from the restroom, he placed a piece of food on my plate. "Petter, do you ever feel like there's another person standing between us?" His hand paused midair as he was peeling a shrimp, but he quickly recovered. "Who would be between us? Why are you saying things like this?" "No reason. Just a thought." After dinner, his phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of the screen as he tilted it away. "See you tomorrow, Petter," Sienna had written. He sent a quick emoji in response, locked the screen, and took my hand. "Let's go home." I let him lead me down the street, looking down at our joined hands. The streetlights cast our long, overlapping shadows on the pavement. I remembered when he first held my hand at 18. Back then, if I closed my eyes, my mind was filled with nothing but his face. I closed my eyes and lightly touched his wrist. The two faces were still there, mine and Sienna's, perfectly equal. He turned to look at me, noticing I had stopped walking. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, catching up to his pace. He squeezed my hand, a gesture that felt entirely natural, exactly as it always had. But I knew everything had changed. At 11 that night, I went to his study with another glass of milk. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear him on the phone, his voice carrying a soft, tender tone I hadn't heard in a very long time. "Yeah, go to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. I miss you too." He hung up, looking startled when he saw me standing in the doorway. "Why are you still awake? Do you always speak to your staff so gently?" "It was just a normal conversation, Valerie. Don't let your imagination run wild." Without a word, I turned and walked away. A moment later, I heard the heavy click of his study door closing. He had never closed that door before. I waited in our room for 20 minutes. When he finally walked in and saw me sitting up, I looked at him. "Petter, there's something I need to tell you. I've had a secret since I was a child. Whenever I touch someone, I can see the face of the person they love most in their heart." He froze, his jacket half off. "When I touched you at 7, I saw myself. When you held my hand at 18, it was me. When you proposed, it was me. But on our anniversary, when I adjusted your collar, I saw two faces, mine and Sienna's." The silence in the bedroom was deafening. Then he let out a dry, nervous laugh. "You have quite the imagination, Valerie. Have you been spending too much time alone lately? I am telling you the absolute truth." The smile vanished from his face. "Are you feeling all right? Maybe we should schedule an appointment with a doctor." I stood up and reached for his hand. "Let me touch you right now. Close your eyes and think of the person you love, and I'll tell you who it is." He snatched his hand back. It wasn't a violent gesture, but it was incredibly deliberate. "Valerie, enough. If you have a problem with Sienna, talk to me. She has a boyfriend, and this kind of baseless suspicion is incredibly unfair to her." He grabbed his jacket and walked out of the house. I stood in the center of the room, my hand still empty in the air. He didn't return until 2 in the morning, smelling of cold wind and cigarette smoke. I pretended to be asleep as he quietly climbed into bed and pulled me into his arms. I closed my eyes. Only one face remained. It was Sienna's. My face was completely gone. His arm was draped over my waist, his warm breath brushing against my neck, but for the first time in 21 years, I couldn't find myself in his heart. I gently slipped out of his embrace. He murmured something in his sleep, but didn't wake. Once his breathing evened out, I packed a small bag and moved into the guest room. At breakfast the next morning, he noticed my slippers by the guest room door. "Why did you sleep in there?" "I had insomnia, and I didn't want to keep you awake." "Oh," he murmured, his eyes already returning to his phone screen. He didn't ask anything else. 3 days after moving into the guest room, I stared at the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. A blood test at the clinic confirmed I was 6 weeks pregnant. I slid the ultrasound photo into the pages of my journal, writing a single sentence on the blank page. "By the time you arrived, your father's heart was already empty of your mother." Later that afternoon, I went to his office building. Just as I arrived, I saw his car parked near the entrance. Petter was opening the passenger door for Sienna, holding his hand over her head to protect her from the low frame as she climbed inside. That seat had always been mine. That gentle gesture had once belonged only to me. "Let's go back," I told the taxi driver. I clutched my bag, the ultrasound report inside pressing against my fingers, but I didn't call him. When he came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. I went to your office today. He didn't stop untying his shoes. Why didn't you come up? If I had, what would I have said? He looked up at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. What is it now, Valerie? I saw you open the passenger door for her. I saw you protect her head. You used to only do that for me. He let out a heavy, frustrated sigh. She's my assistant, Valerie. Opening the door is basic courtesy. You never used to be like this. You used to be so understanding, so mature. Understanding? So the things you did for me can be handed to anyone. And if I care, I'm being immature? Is that what you mean? He rubbed his temples. I've had a long, exhausting day. I don't want to fight about this. He walked into his study and shut the door. The next day, I sent him a text asking him to make time to accompany me to a doctor's appointment. Sure, he replied. But at 7 the following morning, a message popped up on my phone. An urgent business trip came up. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. Have the driver take you if you're not feeling well. Love you, Petter. I tried calling him, but his phone was switched off. When I called his secretary, the young woman sounded confused. Mr. Petter doesn't have any travel scheduled for today, Mrs. Petter. I took a cab to the hospital alone. Sitting in the corridor, I watched the couples around me. A husband kneeling to tie his wife's shoes, another supporting his wife as they walked slowly down the hall. I sat in my seat, utterly alone. The doctor reviewed my charts with a frown. Your progesterone levels are dangerously low, and there's a significant risk of miscarriage. Is your husband here? He's out of town on business, I said quietly. She didn't press further, handing me the consent forms to sign myself. While waiting for my hormone injections, I scrolled through social media and saw Sienna's latest post. A series of photos of a sunset on a beach. The caption read, "Someone said he wanted to see the ocean when he was stressed, so he dragged me along. It's so nice to be pampered by the boss." In the corner of the last photo, there was a man's hand resting on the table. On his ring finger was the white gold band that matched the one on my left hand. That night, the severe cramping began. I took a cab to the emergency room alone, and the nurses rushed me straight into the operating room. Is it gone? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The pregnancy has terminated. We need to perform a quick procedure to clear the tissue. Is your husband on his way? I'll sign the forms myself. By the time the surgery was over, it was 3 a.m. I sat in the cold hallway, calling his number repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. Finally, I sent him a text. Petter, something happened. Please come back. He didn't call back until the following afternoon. Through the receiver, I could hear the sound of crashing waves and a car engine starting. I just landed, Valerie. What's going on? Ignoring the sharp ache in my body, I kept my voice flat. It's already been taken care of. Oh good. I'll be home tonight, and I'll bring back some fresh seafood. He arrived later that evening, placing a bag of crabs on the kitchen counter. I got these for you. I'll steam them tomorrow. I didn't say a word. Noticing my pale face, he stepped closer, reaching out to touch my forehead. I stepped back, evading his hand. I have something to tell you. I was preg. Before I could finish, his phone rang, playing the custom ringtone he had set for Sienna. His expression softened instantly, a look I knew all too well. He held up a finger, asking me to wait, and quickly answered. Sienna? What's wrong? Even though his phone wasn't on speaker, the quiet room allowed me to hear her trembling voice clearly. Petter, I think I have a fever. My whole body aches and I don't think I can. Have you taken your temperature? What is it? 101.3. He was already walking toward the door, reaching for his keys. Stay there. I'm coming over. Only as he reached the door did he remember I was standing there. Valerie, Sienna has a severe fever and she's entirely alone. I need to go check on her, but I'll be back as soon as I can. We'll talk about whatever you wanted to say when I get back. The words died in my throat. The front door clicked shut, and his footsteps faded down the hall. The apartment was dead silent. On the counter, the bag of crabs sat in its plastic wrapping. The very last spark of love I had for him finally went out. The silence that followed the click of the front door was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that didn't just occupy a room. It settled into the floorboards, the curtains, and the very air I breathed. On the kitchen counter, the plastic bag of crabs sat under the harsh fluorescent light. One of them clattered weakly against the plastic, a dull scraping sound that only made the kitchen feel emptier. I didn't cry. The tears had been washed away in the sterile white light of the emergency room the night before. My body felt hollow, a dull ache radiating from my lower abdomen, but my mind was remarkably clear. Slowly, I walked back to our bedroom. I opened the closet and pulled out a single medium-sized suitcase. I didn't pack everything. I packed my books, my journals, my favorite sweaters, and the simple clothes I had bought with my own salary. I left behind the designer coats Petter had bought me for my birthdays, the silk pajamas and the jewelry. On the vanity, The pearl earrings he had given me for our anniversary sat in their velvet box. 1. I took them out and laid them flat on the dark wood. Beside them, I placed my wedding band. The white gold ring felt incredibly light as it slid off my finger. For 3 years, it had been a permanent fixture, leaving a faint, pale indent on my skin. Now it was just a cold circle of metal. I pulled out my phone and dialed Serena. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with worry. Valerie, are you okay? I've been trying to call you all night. I'm okay, I said, my voice steady. Can you come pick me up? I'm ready to leave. I'll be there in 15 minutes. While waiting, I sat at the dining table and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I wrote a simple, concise note. Peter, the divorce papers will be sent to your office by my lawyer tomorrow. Do not call me. Do not look for me. The child we conceived on our anniversary is gone. I lost it the night you were on the beach. I had the surgery alone while you were away. I hope Sienna's fever has broken. Valerie. Beside the note, I placed the hospital discharge summary, the surgical consent forms bearing only my signature, and the crumpled ultrasound photo I had retrieved from my journal. 1. When Serena arrived, she didn't ask any questions. She took one look at my pale face, the suitcase at my feet, and the papers on the table, and her eyes welded with tears of quiet, burning fury. She wrapped her arms around me, holding me gently, careful not to press against my aching body. Let's go home, Val, she whispered. I didn't look back as we walked out. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind us, and for the first time in 21 years, I didn't care where Peter was. 1. Peter did not return until 10 the next morning. He walked into the apartment carrying a cup of coffee and a pastry box from the bakery downstairs, his mind still lingering on the soft, helpless way Sienna had clung to his sleeve when he brought her medicine the night before. 1. He felt a slight pang of guilt about leaving Valerie so abruptly, but he rationalized it. Valerie is strong, he told himself. She's always been the mature one. She'll understand. 1. But as he stepped into the living room, the absolute coldness of the apartment hit him. The air conditioning was off. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in a dull gray shadow. Valerie, he called out, setting the coffee down on the counter. His eyes fell on the bag of crabs. 1. In the summer heat of the closed kitchen, they had already begun to spoil, a faint, metallic odor rising from the plastic. He frowned, walking toward the bedroom. Valerie, are you still asleep? The guest room was empty. The master bedroom was perfectly made, the sheets pulled tight, devoid of any warmth. Then he saw the closet. The door was slightly ajar. Half of the hangers were empty. Her suitcases were gone. On the vanity, the velvet box of pearl earrings sat open, the white gold wedding band gleaming dully beside them. 1. A sudden, sharp panic seized his chest. He ran back to the dining room and finally saw the papers scattered across the table. 1. He picked up the handwritten note first. As his eyes scanned the words, the coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. The child gone. The surgery alone. The night you were on the beach. No, Peter whispered, his breath catching in his throat. No, this is a joke. She's trying to punish me. He snatched up the medical discharge papers. 1. The hospital's official stamp was clear. The date of admission was the exact night he had turned off his phone to watch the sunset on the beach with Sienna. 1. The time of the emergency. Curatage was 1:45 a.m., the exact hour he had been laughing at a joke Sienna made. In the passenger seat of his car. 1. His phone rang. He answered it instantly, his voice shaking. Valerie? Valerie, please. Mr. Petter, a cold, professional male voice replied. This is Arthur Vance, legal counsel for Valerie Sanders. I am calling to inform you that the divorce petition has been filed. My client requests that all future communication go through my office. Where is she? Petter roared, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the phone. Where is my wife? Let me speak to her. She was pregnant. Why didn't anyone tell me? Mr. Petter, your wife attempted to tell you multiple times, the lawyer replied, his tone laced with quiet disgust. You chose to ignore her. Please, expect the official paperwork by tomorrow afternoon. Do not attempt to contact Mrs. Sanders, or we will file for a restraining order. The line went dead. Petter fell back into a chair, the shattered remains of his coffee cup pooling around his shoes. He looked at the ultrasound photo, the tiny, faint blur of a life that had existed for only a brief moment. A life he had traded for a sunset and a cup of medicine. For the first time in his life, the heavy, suffocating weight of his own choices began to crush him. 2 weeks passed. For Valerie, the days were quiet, painted in the soft, muted colors of a slow recovery. I stayed at Serena's family cottage by the lake, far away from the bustling city center. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of birds and the gentle rustle of pine trees. My body was healing. The sharp cramps had subsided into a dull, manageable ache, and the color was slowly returning to my cheeks. But for Petter, those 2 weeks were a descent into living hell. He was entirely useless at the office. He sat at his desk for hours, staring at a blank screen, his phone clutched in his hand. He had sent hundreds of messages to Valerie, but every single one remained undelivered. He had gone to Serena's apartment, only for Serena to dump a bucket of cold water from her balcony directly onto his head, shouting at him to get lost before she called the police. Sienna noticed the change. She walked into his office one afternoon, wearing a delicate lavender dress, holding a cup of his favorite espresso. She let out a soft, sweet laugh as she set it down. "You look so tired, Petter. Let me massage your shoulders. You've been working too hard lately." She reached out, her fingers gently touching his neck. But the moment her hands made contact, Petter flinched violently, knocking the espresso cup off the desk. The hot liquid splashed across her lavender dress. "Don't touch me." Petter snapped, his voice harsh and raw. Sienna gasped, taking a step back, her eyes instantly filling with tears. "Petter, what's wrong? I only wanted to help. Your dress, it's ruined." Normally, Petter would have immediately apologized, grabbed a tissue, and comforted her with soft, frantic words. But today, as he looked at her tear-filled eyes and her trembling lower lip, he felt absolutely nothing but a deep churning nausea. He remembered Valerie's words. "Whenever I touch someone, I can see the face of the person they love most in their heart." He remembered how Valerie had looked at him on their anniversary, her eyes filled with a quiet, devastating sorrow as she adjusted his collar. He had dismissed her, gaslit her, and called her crazy. But she had been telling the truth. She had seen his betrayal long before he had even admitted it to himself. "Get out," Petter said, his voice flat. "Petter, please." "I said get out of my office, Sienna," he roared, slamming his hand on the desk. Sienna shrunk back, her face turning pale. She had never seen him like this. The gentle, pampering boss, who treated her like a princess, had vanished, replaced by a hollow, angry stranger. She clutched her stained dress and hurried out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Petter buried his face in his hands. He didn't love Sienna. He realized it now, with a terrifying, absolute certainty. Sienna was just an escape, a shiny, flattering mirror that made him feel young, powerful, and needed. But Valerie was his home. She was the anchor of his entire life, the only woman who had truly known him since he was 7 years old. And he had cut the anchor loose. It was a crisp Tuesday afternoon when Petter finally found me. He had hired a private investigator to track Serena's car, eventually leading him to the lakeside cottage. I was sitting on the wooden porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, holding a warm cup of chamomile tea. The lake was a perfect, glassy blue, reflecting the golden autumn leaves of the surrounding trees. The sound of car tires on gravel broke the silence. I didn't turn my head as Petter got out of his vehicle. I heard his heavy, hurried footsteps climb the wooden stairs. "Valerie," he choked out. I took a slow sip of my tea before turning to look at him. He looked terrible. His hair was unwashed, his jaw covered in a rough, uneven stubble. The expensive suit jacket he usually wore with pride was wrinkled and hanging loosely on his shoulders. He looked 20 years older than he had 2 weeks ago. "You shouldn't be here, Petter," I said, my voice devoid of anger. It was the complete lack of emotion in my tone that seemed to hurt him the most. "Valerie, please, just let me speak," he begged, falling to his knees beside my chair. He reached out, his hands trembling as he hovered them over mine, not daring to touch me without permission. "I didn't know about the baby. I swear to you, Valerie, if I had known, I would have never left that night. I would have stayed by your side. I would have done anything. If you need a child to make you value your wife, Petter, then we had nothing to save," I replied, looking out over the water. "I tried to tell you. I asked you to come to the doctor with me. You chose to go to the beach with her. I was stupid. I was blind." Tears finally spilled over his eyes, tracking through the dirt on his face. "It was a mistake, Valerie. Sienna means nothing to me. I've cut her off. I've transferred her to another department. I don't see her anymore. Please, Valerie, we've been together since we were 21 years. You can't just throw that away." "I didn't throw it away," I said, turning my gaze back to him. "You did. One touch at a time." He stared at my hands, his breathing ragged. You said you have a secret. That you can see who people love." He grabbed my hand suddenly, pressing my palm flat against his chest, right over his beating heart. "Touch me, Valerie. Use your gift. Look into my heart right now. I swear to you, it's only you. It has to be you. Just look." I didn't pull my hand away. I closed my eyes. The familiar darkness of my mind opened up. For 21 years, whenever I touched his chest, a bright, beautiful image of my own face would appear, smiling back at me with warmth and adoration. But now, as my palm pressed against his frantic, pounding heart, the darkness flickered. A face began to form. It wasn't Sienna's. He had indeed cast her out of his mind in his panic. But it wasn't mine either. The face that appeared in his heart was Peter's own face. It was his own reflection, weeping, covered in regret, mourning the loss of his perfect, comfortable life. He didn't love me. He loved the idea of me as his devoted, childhood sweetheart who would always forgive him. He loved his own comfort, his own ego, and his own peace of mind. He wanted me back not because he loved Valerie the person, but because he couldn't bear to be the villain in his own story. I opened my eyes and slowly pulled my hand back. What did you see? Peter asked, his eyes shining with a desperate, pathetic hope. Is it you? Tell me it's you, Valerie. I looked at him, feeling a profound, quiet pity. I saw you, Peter. It is only ever you. He let out a ragged sob of relief, completely misinterpreting my words. I knew it. I knew you'd see it. We can fix this, sweetheart. We can go home. No, I interrupted, standing up and pulling the wool blanket tighter around my shoulders. You don't understand. I saw your face, Peter. You only love yourself. You only love what you've lost because it makes you look bad. We are over. Before he could speak, Serena stepped out of the cottage door, holding a heavy wooden broom. Her eyes narrowed in a dangerous glare. Get off this property, Peter, she said, her voice dripping with ice. Now. Peter looked at me, begging with his eyes, but I turned my back to him, looking back out at the lake. After a long, agonizing silence, I heard his slow, heavy footsteps descend the stairs, followed by the roar of his car engine fading into the distance. A month later, the autumn leaves had fallen, leaving the trees bare and stark against the gray November sky. I met Peter one final time at his lawyer's office to sign the dissolution of our marriage. The room was quiet, smelling of old paper and leather. Peter sat across the mahogany table from me, looking completely hollowed out. His hair was cropped short, his face pale and thin. Over the past month, his life had completely unraveled. Sienna, realizing that Peter was emotionally dead and would never give her the lifestyle she wanted, had tried to blackmail him. She had leaked their private messages to the company's HR department, claiming sexual harassment. The board of directors, already disgusted by Peter's sudden drop in performance and the high-profile nature of the scandal, launched an immediate internal audit. They discovered that Peter had authorized multiple business trips and expensive dinners for Sienna using company funds. To avoid a massive public lawsuit, Peter was forced to resign from the firm he had spent his entire adult life building. Sienna was fired immediately after, her reputation in the corporate world ruined. When she tried to call Peter to beg for help, he had already blocked her number. Here are the papers, Mrs. Sanders, the lawyer said, pushing the documents toward me. I picked up the pen and signed my name on the bottom line. My hand was steady, the ink flowing smoothly across the paper. I pushed the documents toward Peter. He stared at the signature for a long time, his hand trembling as he picked up the pen. Is this really how it ends, Valerie? 21 years. Gone in a single signature? It didn't end today, Peter, I said softly. It ended the day you looked at her and didn't think of me. With a shaky hand, Peter signed his name. As he set the pen down, he looked up at me, his eyes red. Can I hold your hand one last time? Just for a second. To say goodbye. I looked at his outstretched hand. I felt no anger, no hatred, and no pain. There was only a vast, peaceful emptiness where my love for him used to live. No, I said, offering a small, polite smile. I don't need to see your heart. Anemora, Petter. I already know what's inside. I stood up, picked up my coat, and walked out of the room, leaving him alone in the quiet office. Spring came early the following year. I used the money from the divorce settlement to buy a small, charming flower shop in a quiet coastal town, 3 hours away from the city. The shop had large glass windows that let in the warm morning sun, and the air was always filled with the sweet, fresh scent of eucalyptus, lavender, and freshly cut roses. I lived in a small apartment above the shop. Every morning, I would walk down the wooden stairs, open the doors, and set out the colorful buckets of blossoms. On the sidewalk, one afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up to the curb. A tall man in a simple denim shirt and dirt-stained jeans climbed out, carrying a large wooden crate filled with rare, vibrant blue hydrangeas. He had a kind, open face, and a warm smile that reached his eyes. Delivery for Valerie, he said, his voice deep and pleasant. That's me, I smiled, stepping forward to help him carry the heavy crate. As we both reached for the wooden handles, his bare fingers brushed against my wrist. Habitually, my eyelids fluttered closed. The familiar darkness of my mind opened up. But this time there was no panic, no flickering shadows, and no selfish reflections. Inside his heart, I saw a beautiful, sprawling landscape of his family, his hard work, and a soft, glowing light that seemed to represent a quiet, budding curiosity, a gentle, respectful interest in the woman standing before him. It wasn't an obsessive, consuming fire, but a healthy, warm emotion that had room to grow. I opened my eyes and smiled at him. Thank you. They're beautiful. I'm Leo, he said, extending his hand properly this time. I grow them up at the Ridge. If you ever need more, just let me know. I'm Valerie, I replied, shaking his hand warmly. After he left, I walked back into the shop and closed the door behind me. I walked over to the large mirror hanging on the wall, surrounded by jasmine vines. I stood there for a moment, looking at my reflection. My cheeks were flushed with a healthy pink, and my eyes were bright and clear. Slowly, I raised my right hand and pressed it flat against my own chest, right over my beating heart. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 22 years, my mind was not filled with Petter's face one. It was not filled with the pain of the past, or the empty space of what had been lost. Instead, in the warm, quiet center of my own heart, a face slowly appeared. It was mine. I was smiling, surrounded by light, completely whole, and entirely free. I had finally learned to love myself most of all.